So let's go ahead and begin. Thanks so much for being here today, everyone. I'm Reverend Carrie Kopnick, and I am the community minister here at the Chaplaincy Institute. And I'll tell you, it's so nice to have you here. What a beautiful way to spend a Tuesday afternoon. This event is called Chi Talks. This is like TED Talks. It's a monthly event that explores the different facets of spirituality through an interfaith lens with our Chi community. We're here every third Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, and I'm pretty sure, 90% sure, that next month the topic will be divine feminine. So watch your email and your social media for information about that. We are recording today's session, so if you wish not to be on camera, you can turn off your video and then your image won't appear in the recording. Also, we will have time at the end of our session for questions, either questions about today's topic or about the Chaplaincy Institute if you're interested. A little information about the Chaplaincy Institute, because we have some folks here who are new faces. The Chaplaincy Institute provides education for people who are seeking to serve in many different venues: hospitals, hospices, during disasters, in prisons, in corporate ministry, in the military, for activists, and also in environmental contexts as eco-ministers. She trains spiritual leaders in many different ways. We have a spiritual direction certificate program, a chaplaincy certificate program, and we have an emerging sacred justice ministry training for spiritual leaders and people who are in other helping professions to help support them in tending the spiritual needs of our diverse justice movements. We have the oldest and the most, I believe, the most respected interfaith seminary in the United States. Our ordination or faith group endorsement is recognized by the Association of Professional Chaplains, the Veterans Administration, and the military. We also are here to offer a transfer of ordination for clergy who feel that their ministry has evolved beyond the faith that originally ordained them, or for people who are seeking a dual ordination because they feel an additional call to interfaith ministry to be in alignment with their call. If anybody would like to have a conversation with me about becoming an interfaith chaplain or minister or spiritual director, please reach out for a conversation. I'm always happy to be in touch. Or you can reach out to our Director of Administration, Michelle Gantz, for a conversation about all of the seminary certificate programs. I'll send you a follow-up email with all of that information after, and I'll also put it in the chat. But here's a special invitation to explore our open courses. And this is true for all of us, people who were ordained by Chi 20 years ago. I've been a spiritual director since the beginning of Interfaith Spiritual Direction. The upcoming open course is called Being with Dying and Death, and it happens July 18th through 20th. So if this is a topic that's interesting to you, our course keeps evolving. So there probably, even if you've taken it before, there's probably new information. And if you're new to the Chaplaincy Institute, it's a great way to try us out with no application, just to get to know us. I can also invite you to our next open house, first Tuesday of the month, always at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, and that's on July 1st. All right. Now I want to say a little bit about our beloved speaker today. Chaplain Riley is a queer femme hospice chaplain and death doula based in Portland, Oregon. Ordained through the Chaplaincy Institute and board certified, she brings deep compassion to those navigating illness, dying, and grief. Riley is a beloved faculty member here at Chi, offering wisdom on topics such as end-of-life care, grief, and medical aid in dying. Riley's practice is shaped not only by her education, but also by her lived experience and personal healing journey. At home, she finds peace crocheting, singing to her 23-pound cat, Prince Genevieve, and walking among the redwoods. Riley offers phone-based death doula and grief support, and I will add contact information for Riley in our follow-up email. All right, thank you so much for being with us here today, Riley, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Carrie, for that beautiful introduction. And I must say that my 23-pound black cat will likely come through around 4:30 thinking that it's time to feed him. So you might hear quite a meow come through, but he can wait. So hi, everyone. I'm Riley Sophia. People call me Chaplain Riley when I'm working, but I'm Reverend Riley too. You can just call me Riley. It's really good to be here today. Um, it's really good to be a part of things that the Chaplaincy Institute is doing, because really, honestly, when I was in my schooling for my master's degree, and I also got to attend the Chaplaincy Institute, that was what really, really made a difference in the work that I do. So just want to shout out to Chaplaincy Institute and how grateful I am for um, everyone's part in my formation. I'd like to start by offering an opening for us, just kind of a way to gather ourselves together. And it's invitational, so you don't have to participate if you don't feel it. Um, I know that each one of us have different bodies and different situations, places, experiences that we're in. And so the invitation to find yourself the most comfortable spot in your seat that you can, or if you're standing, and we're just going to settle in together. I'll be singing a song and I'll be singing it 3 times through. But let's just start with some silence. So just inviting whoever would like to just come into a silent place and just notice what your breath is doing. And be kind to yourself with however you're breathing, just noticing. Acknowledging now that even though we are in separate places in our physical bodies, we are together in our hearts. So just imagining we're all sitting in a room together. I'm going to sing a Baha'i song, and the word God is used. So I invite you to find whatever word means the ineffable, the deeper knowledge, the divine for you. Blessed is the spot and the house and the place and the city and the house and the mountain and the refuge and the cave and the valley and the land and the sea and the island and the meadow, where mention of God has been made, and her name glorified. Mm-hmm. 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 Blessed is the spot and the house and the place and the city and the home and the meadow and the refuge and the cave and the valley and the land and the sea and the island and the mountain, where mention of God has been made, and her praise glorify. Mm-hmm. 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 And as you notice that I only decided to sing it 2 times, I invite you to bless this place that we're in together, mentioning the name of all that is holy and love, that we are here with each other, with our hearts united. So be it. As you're ready and willing, inviting you back into our shared space together. So good to see your faces. Thank you all for being here. Such a treat. So the first thing I like to say before I start talking to a group of people is that I am a learner and a grower, and someone who is on a path of my own evolution. And so the things that I share here today, they're my stories. Some of them are things that you might be interested in, some things maybe not. And honestly, we're each experts in our own different ways. And so some of you might know much more about this topic than I do. So I invite you to take what you need and leave the rest. And I trust that you can ask questions about things that maybe you want more answers to, or even share a little bit about what you know. I am okay with questions being asked while I'm presenting. I'll be presenting for about 20 minutes or so. So I am okay with questions being asked. I might not get to them right away if I'm in a flow, but I definitely will get them. So you can raise your hands, or you can put something in the chat, and then Carrie's going to help monitor the chat. I'd like to start with a personal story. I consider it one of the formative reasons that I've been called into death work. When I was 23 years old, my 15-year-old stepsister was killed in a car accident on the 5th of July, 1998. And everything that I had ever known changed completely in a matter of minutes. She had not been my stepsister for more than a few years. So I didn't have the same experience of loss that I might have if she'd been with me for all those years. But what I did have was the experience of living in a family, experiencing my own grief, and then watching how the family grieves. I noticed how I felt when I heard my stepmom wailing, and that sound has never left my ears. The sound of a mother losing a child is something that I'll never forget. I noticed how people would bring casseroles over and we'd say thank you. And then we would say how much we were sick of casseroles, but then we knew that we wouldn't eat otherwise. And so we had to cut them up into small pieces and try to get some on the plate to each other, microwave it or whatever. And we were just grumpy, even though we were trying to be grateful. I remember how flowers were beautiful and then they died, and how much we hated it, but we would have hated it more if no one brought flowers. So all of these different conflicting things going along with my own personal questions of death and dying and what happens after you die, having been raised really traditionally conservative Christian, and then having gone on to more of my own spirituality at that point, trying to kind of make meaning of the difference between, or where those things could come together, right? But what I learned the most from that time was how to be present to my own grief, and also how different ways families might react to the loss of a loved one. And that formed me in a way that I feel that it was like a little stitch in the fabric of me that I never would have known I'd end up being a reverend and a chaplain. It was back when I was in a girl punk band and doing street activism mostly. It was a very different time. So only after I got my call to chaplaincy did I look back and go, oh, I've been doing chaplain support work for a long time. Because when anyone's friends or family would die around me, I would put everything aside that I could and go and support them through. Sometimes people say to me, it takes a special kind of person to be in hospice. And I'm a bit neurodivergent. So when I first would get that from people, I would go, no, it's not. It's fun. It's fine. I didn't understand how to mask the way that I felt about it. But what I found is that it doesn't take a special person to be in hospice. It takes a certain kind of person to work with death and dying. And it's just like a bridge builder. I could never build a bridge. It takes a special kind of person to build a bridge that can stand up. And I feel like working with death and dying, if you're called to it, then it just feels like a beautiful, fulfilling task most of the time. So I wanted to just offer that. And also for those of you possibly discerning working with death or dying, listening to that call, because those of us called to this work, we're the ones who need to be doing it. So the ones who aren't called to it, don't try to stay in a hospice job they don't want. There's a myth that I hear a lot about what a good death looks like. And I think that the good death people, the people who came up with that language, had a really good intention by coming up with that language. Because the idea was that it didn't always have to be a horrible thing. But like any good idea, I feel like that's been taken out of context now. And it feels a bit to me like when someone has a birth plan, and then there's what happens when you give birth. And as someone who's also done birth doula work, I've watched how that one of the big things is to say there's what you've planned, but it needs to be a rough draft. It needs to be a movable, living document. And so I think that sometimes people have either they think a death's going to be a horrible death, or they're going to work really hard to make it a good death. And that actually the truth of a good death is actually one that flows with what's really happening. Where the people that are with the person who's dying are able to tend to their feelings and also honor the way that death can look. A lot of my job is educating that it's really normal for someone to gurgle or to have spit coming out of their mouths or to be having a ragged breathing that stops and goes and it seems like they're dying and they aren't yet, because it feels really shocking if you haven't learned those things. And a lot of us have that longing that when we die, we'll just be at a ripe old age and we'll just fall asleep and not wake up. And that's only true for a small percentage of people in my experience. One example of that was working with a woman who was dying, and she had done a lot of personal work to have a peaceful dying process. She'd looked at her unfinished business. She had said goodbye to her loved ones. She's written letters. She'd done all these things to help her death go well. But once she was actually in the active dying stage, she was conscious. She wasn't able to be woken, but she was still here. I call it being in the between. And I hadn't met her before. I was a new chaplain for her. So when I was called in by her daughter to see if we could help calm her restlessness, that maybe me coming by could help out and offering some traditional Lutheran prayers, because she was a Lutheran woman. When I was sitting bedside with the daughter, we spent time in small, quiet conversation, and then we spent time in prayerful silence. I offered a hymn or two that her mother had loved, and yet her mother was still restless and just didn't seem comfortable, even though she was likely physically comfortable. So thinking that I'd done all I could, and the key word is thinking, because sometimes it's best to listen to our knowing and not our thinking. I was getting ready to go, and her daughter said, "Your tattoos, they're redwoods." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "My mom grew up in the redwoods, and she really, really longed to go back there before she died, and she wasn't able to." And it felt like spirit had just like handed us a blessing for this woman that my tattoos had shown. Oh, I was wearing my sweater. I'd actually taken it off because I got too warm. It all felt like it just fell into place. So I sat back down, and together, her daughter and I went to a redwood forest together in our minds and our hearts. And I described what the sun coming through the trees looks like. And I described the sound of the birds and the sound of the river nearby, and that feeling that you get when you're amongst these ancient wise beings that have been living like 1,500 or 2,000 years. They're the oldest beings I've ever met. And as we spent time in our redwood forest together, her breathing calmed, her restlessness abated. About an hour after I left, she died peacefully. One thing I love about this work is that I also get to not expect that things will go how I think they'll go. And listening to that deeper knowing, that heart wisdom, that spirit of wisdom coming through, being able to like notice that my mind might say, okay, things are done here, but if I'm listening, there's more. So I was watching a video the other day of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and the thing about her is that she is like, wow. I mean, she started doing work that had never been done around a subject, death and dying, that was really at the point she was starting it. It was really a awful institution. People were put into places that looked a lot more like just like kind of like what's the word? Like mental institutions used to look like they were just institutionalized when they were dying. People were dying in hospitals. And I know that what she was doing was actually bringing old wisdom forward into our industrialized time. But I'm really grateful that she did the research she did. And she talked about how we all have, she calls them the four quadrants: mind, body, spirit, and emotions. And so she was talking about how we need to listen to the language of the spiritual quadrant, which is all knowledge, all of it, far more than any of us, because intellectual knowledge is the most superficial part of the human being. I love that quote personally because I think my mind and my spirit and my heart need to work together, but living in a culture that prizes the intellectual mind so much more than that spiritual knowing. It's easy to think I'm not doing enough because I didn't think enough. When really what I found is being present with people where they're at and really listening with that spiritual knowing is the best work I can offer. Would you like to ask any questions, or would you like me to go on? Because sometimes listening for a long period can be tedious. So I'm open to any questions that might come up right now. All right, I'll keep going.
I have one.
Yeah. Nigel?
I have one. It's Nigel, by the way. You talk about these four elements: body, mind, spirit, and emotion. Is not emotion actually the whole essence of who we are, which is within the spirit?
Yes, I think this was just how Elizabeth Kubler-Ross divided things when she was talking about bringing holistic healthcare in, because so much the focus was only on the body. So she was trying to separate them up into four quadrants so that more attention would be to the spirit and the emotions, right? And she separated those because they would get lumped together and wouldn't necessarily be seen as the spiritual and the feelings that we have. So I agree with you completely. Yes, the essence of the feelings being with the spirit, it's all connected. Does that help?
It does indeed. That's basically it's what we agree on.
Great. Who I see a hand, Jacqueline?
Yes, I had a question. So I have been introduced to this book called Awake at the Bedside.
Mhm.
And it has a section, believe it or not, from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And she talks about unfinished business and how you know that you know. And I was going to ask you a question about how important do you think, because this book spends a lot of time on its contemplative teachings on palliative and end of life care. And it spends a lot of time talking about your contemplating your own death and what you see is that. So I was going to ask you what you think. Is that a very important piece to enhancing the work of being with death and dying, and what your thoughts were about that?
Oh, thank you, Jacqueline. That's a great question. I really appreciate that. Also, I made a note of the name of the book because I haven't read that one. Um, I find that one reason I'm so good at my job is because I have almost died a few times. And I have been in car accidents. I've had illnesses that put me in the ICU. And also I have a lot of childhood trauma, which kind of taught me the complexity of survival. And so I would say if that wasn't one's experience, then probably it would be important to start kind of imagining that. Um, it's hard for me to speak to it since it's my experience to have already lived through like 3 or 4 different near death experiences. Um, so yes, I think it is really important to start with ourselves when we're working with others. And so when I teach the classes, I'll be teaching classes in July in the death and dying module. When I teach those classes, the first place we start is with ourselves, because when we walk into a space with our own stories, if we don't know those stories, we're that much more likely to project them onto others or to get upset or triggered and not know that that's what's happening. And for those of us who've either had enough experience with this or who have done what you're talking about, that visualization, I think that at least for me, it's easier to compartmentalize it and save it for later and go, oh, there's my stuff. Oh, that's my stuff about that. Oh, there's my old grief. This reminds me of when my friend died. I hold it in love. I put it aside for later. But if I don't know those things about myself, I'm more likely to kind of project onto others. Um, and I think that "die before you die" is a phrase that I've heard before in Sufism specifically, but the idea that we're not walking around terrified of our own deaths, the idea that we are actually making friends with our own deaths, knowing that that is inevitable, um, and therefore less likely to be afraid of those who are dying in front of us. So I see a hand, but I also saw something come up in chat.
Yeah. So it's Vita or Vita. Would you like me to read it, or would you like me to? Would you like to unmute?
Oh, thank you. I wasn't quite sure. Thank you, ladies.
Yeah.
This is very enlightening for me. The question I did write was, as a doula, how are you received? I'm not quite sure of the structure. Are you invited in? Does the institution or the facility sometimes recommend you? And is there sometimes, I know there would be in my family, resistance from this part of the family and that part of the family? Can you always take the dying person first? That's awkward, but you know what I'm asking. Yeah.
I do. I think I have a sense.
Thank you.
One of the things that that is interesting for myself is that I am a hospice chaplain who also does death doula work, but I don't run a death doula private business except for on the phone offering support. So the people that I'm seeing are my patients because I'm in hospice. And so I'm assigned, there's like a bunch of zip codes that I'm assigned to anyone who comes into those zip codes, right? And being declined, chaplain is the only job you can decline. You need to have your MRS. You need to at least be in touch with your social worker. I guess you can decline the hospice aid, but we are declined quite often, right? So a lot of my work is educating people about what a chaplain is, because mostly I am declined because people who have been hurt by a religion or who are really uncomfortable with religion, or it's against their own values to be formal religious, feel like I'm probably someone from a certain denomination coming in and trying to weave in my beliefs to bring them to what I believe as true. I've educated and talked with my teams that I work with, my nurses, my social workers, my the CNAs, and they know how to, what I call, sell me. So if we have a complicated family that doesn't want me in the said no, especially complicated just because that's where I'm needed most. The nurses or the social workers or the CNAs will actually talk about me and talk about how I am a spiritual person who's there for all people, regardless of religion or spirituality. So that is one way to get in the door, as I say. And then another way that I get in the door is by, if the person on the phone is, when I make that initial call, is open to hearing a little bit more, I just talk about the ways I support people who are not religious. And I'd say at least 40% of the time they'll be like, okay, come over. And as soon as I'm there and they see that I'm just there to be nice, loving, caring, be present, then I'm in. Yeah. So if I were having my own death doula business, I feel like it would be, I would have to be advertising myself and figuring out how to get in. And I don't have to do that part, which is one reason I went into hospice, because I live with a lot of chronic illness and I don't have the wherewithal to run my own business. So. Mhm. All right. Yeah. So, Ileani.
Yeah, hi. I am in that, just experienced you in spiritual care concerns, and I'm in the death and dying class as well. So I'll get you
Good.
yet again.
I thought you were
Um,
familiar. Thank you.
yeah. Um, and I'm curious. I've experienced four deaths, of two fathers and two younger people, peers. Every one has been so completely different. I mean, 100% completely different. And it's interesting to me in the current Moodle I'm doing for the dying and death class that talks about a Buddhist perspective with what they call dissolution of elements, without going into details about that. Do you have a sense? You said in the beginning, you talk to people about what's normal. There's drool, there's ragged breathing. We had not a clue the first time I witnessed this, not a clue what was normal, what was not normal. How would you describe that? What's
Hmm.
what's the parameters for what's normal?
Hmm.
I don't know if
Well,
is that clear question?
I'll ask a clarifying question if I think I got it. What, I agree with you 1,000%. Every death is different. And they might not be all different in all the ways, but they're different in all these other ways, right? Like you might have like, well, they were a little restless, each one, but one of them died in their sleep. One of them died restlessly. Like there's all of the different ways, like birth. It's just depends on the person, their life, their body, what they're going through, the family, even the family dynamics can change how someone dies. Um, and from what I've experienced, because I work with the hospices, we actually have paperwork we give people that just says it's called When Death is Near. And it just walks through like what it might look like 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out, 1 week out, what it might look like when someone's really close. And so often the people that I'm serving are so exhausted. They've been caring for their loved one oftentimes for a lot longer than some are last minute deaths, but a lot of them are like 2 or 3 or 5 years with mom or dad living with me. So when we give them all that paperwork, they usually don't even touch it or look at it. And so I don't bring it up the first visit usually, unless someone's close to dying, but I refer to it and I pull it out and I point at the different things, and it really helps normalize it. And then when someone's in the dying process, I refer back to it and I point out what's happening and go, see, we talked about this. Just because when you're that stressed out emotionally and physically, it's hard to remember anything. So we do have that structure that really helps in the hospice. And I think that, if you were to look for it online or something, if you weren't in hospice. I think it'd be pretty easy to find a list like that. I think it could just be really helpful. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to keep talking a little more since we're weaving in the questions and answers. I think that I'll just present a little bit more and then do a little bit more questions and answers. All right. Well, we already have talked a little bit about the about using what we have been through to help form how we might be with those who are dying and their families, or our own family who's dying. One way that I love to offer support for people is to sing for them. And so right now I'm just going to sing a song 2 different ways, and then kind of describe the ways that that singing changes where someone is in their own dying process, how I support them. So this is one you may have heard. It's Loosen, Loosen. So if someone is in there, they just came on to hospice and they're just really alert and just kind of getting settled, I'm more likely to sing, Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. And there's such value in a song that lifts and speaks to our bodies. And so often that can be the beginning of a conversation about what they might be carrying in their muscles and bones, and how they use their own spirituality to let things go, and what do they still want to hold on to, that they get to as long as they feel like it, right? I want to apologize that I'm so, can you still see me? I know I'm bright light lit from the side. Am I okay? Okay. The sun is shining in. But when someone is dying, there's such a different rhythm in the space. And I found that sometimes they're restless, so you feel the restlessness, kind of like electricity in the room. And other times someone can be just very, very quiet, almost as if there's a whisper of them left. And I like to join that with my singing to be with them where they're at. So I'm just going to sing it quietly, and then I have a cute story about this. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. So noticing the different feeling. In that one, I feel like the let go, let go, let go is a little bit more what the song is guiding you towards, just with that quieter, calmer way of singing. And I know that many people have different cultural or personal rituals that might happen in a room when someone is dying. And I do my best to walk into spaces, not assuming that I know what is best for a family. That said, what I've found is if I come into a room where a family is really restless and the patient is really restless, and you can feel that they're playing off of each other, and you can see that, like, even if there's someone who is used to loud music playing and bright lights on, in this case it seems to be causing more distress for everyone. Checking out the space and honoring that the ritual is already happening, and then finding a way to work with that and support the family in quieting and slowing. And so I found that lowering the lights, bringing in maybe a soft sound of waves into the room on a recording, or even that soft singing can be so helpful. When I was in San Francisco during my time in the Bay Area, when I was at Chi and getting my master's at Stark King, I I did field education at Maitri, which was an AIDS hospice that started during the AIDS pandemic, and then went on to be more of an AIDS palliative care facility because people weren't dying so frequently of AIDS in the same way. And I met an older gentleman who was probably in his 80s, and he was a piano player, and he said, I played for the Glitter Girls. And I actually asked him about, performing and being out there, and I was like, were you all dressed up glitzy? And he was like, no, I wasn't a glitter girl, I played for the Glitter Girls. And I was like, great. And he called me a glitter girl because I would sing him jazz tunes, and he couldn't play the piano anymore. So we worked, even though I wasn't the chaplain, we worked together around the grief with that not being there. So the songs I brought seemed to help him have the music that he loved to play. When he was dying, I went into the space. He was having, it looked like he was wrinkling his forehead, which usually means pain or discomfort. A volunteer was petting his arm really fast, going, we're here with you, Henry. We're here with you. Kind of like anxious energy. And his name wasn't Henry. I just made that up. And I said, can I trade off? Because I was a volunteer too. She said, sure. So what I did was I just started singing the song, You Can't Take That Away From Me, but 1,000 times slower. So it kind of like, the way you wear your hair, the way you sip your tea. And once again, incredible how the breathing calmed, the movement slowed. There even was a small smile playing on his lips, and just acknowledging like the music is so important for many different phases that we're in. And if we go with what's in the room and we honor kind of what we're feeling in our heart wisdom, can really match the people that we're with, our loved ones, or if we're working with people. Let's see. I think that a lot of reasons that we fear death in the society, and when I say in the society, I would say mainstream American society and culture. So there are lots of people in this country that have different beliefs and cultural norms that aren't part of mainstream society, and they probably should be. But I feel like the reason that we fear death is partially because we are so unfamiliar with it. And that long ago, when we were all getting to see people die around us, it actually took some of the mystery out of it. So I think that seeing people die and how it changes, it can change our skills of tending to ourselves and to others around death and dying. Sometimes I feel really inadequate with the work I do, and I feel like it's not a self-esteem thing. It's just an acknowledgement that actually I am inadequate. And I don't know if that can translate to others. It's actually acknowledging that of my own self, without connecting to spirit, without listening to the room, without having outlets with other people who are going through it with me, or friends and family or colleagues, that I wouldn't be able to do what I do. So I sometimes say where I'm inadequate, spirit is adequate. Yeah. So I think that's what I have for now. If anyone wants to ask more questions. If not, I have plenty more to say. I just skipped a bunch because of time.
Well, I've got another question for you.
Okay.
To have that ability to read the situation that is needed. For some people want to talk, some people do not. Some people want to confess things, other people want to just simply explain things. You have to have that ability to, in effect, listen. And I think that actually, in many respects, listening is perhaps more important than talking. So what do you feel about that?
Oh, that's mostly what I do. I'm quiet a lot of the time. Yeah, thank you for bringing that in though, Nigel, because the foundation of everything I do is being present with people exactly where they're at. And what that means is I'm listening with my whole being, but a lot of times I'm doing a lot more mostly I'm doing a lot more listening than talking. In fact, sometimes when I do these talks or when I teach, I get a little bit like, whoa, why am I still going here? Because sometimes I might offer education, but the other day I went to a death where it had been a shocking death. They didn't know he was going to die, and then he died overnight. We don't have a lot of those in hospice because usually we can tell. And they were just sobbing, 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 distraught. And I just came in and sat down with them and didn't say a word. And probably 20 minutes of them sobbing, and I would just say something like, he was so beloved, or I'm so sorry, and then just kind of like help support their tears to go and go and go. And that was probably the most important part of the visit, was not saying a word. Or saying very little.
So would you say it is very different to actually support a dying person than the people who are actually loving that dying person?
Oh,
A totally
yes.
different attitude needed.
Well, I think for myself, what I found is that, we do all this intellectual training to get into this profession. And I think that that is helpful if it's not dominating what I'm doing, if that's like kind of things I can rely on and pull from, like the resource of that. So knowing things about family dynamics and knowing things about the questions people might ask when they're dying are helpful. But if I'm doing them like a script, then it's not helpful because I need to be with who's in front of me. Working with people who are dying, they oftentimes are having questions about existential questions. Why am I dying? Where am I going? Or why am I not dying is a big one for people like over 92. They're like, I'm ready. I'm good. I lived a long life. Why am I still here? Not everyone, but a larger proportion than I would have thought. And then also sometimes just not wanting to talk about it at all. And all we talk about is their life, the beauty of outside. So really just going with it. Families tend to be so burnt out or so tired that mostly what they're talking about is the day to day. And I actually have to listen for the times when I might want to ask specific questions about their grief and things like that to just check in on the thing underneath what they're surviving with and naming that surviving is normal, making it through. Does that answer your question? I mean, there's so many different ways that it can look, but generally that's what I've seen with the family versus the dying person.
I think one of the things which I find is that there are some people, and obviously you're one of them, that have that gift of the spirit to actually, in effect, relate to those situations. And there are others that just simply can't. And if you don't, forgive me for saying this, but you don't need a degree to have that gift. You just have it, and you know that it's the right thing to say, or the right thing to do, or the right thing to just shut up and let the other person talk. And it's that gift of the spirit which I think is quite often sometimes considered to be, you've got to have this experience which is taught to you as opposed to just being within you.
Yes. What I found is that I agree with you 100%. I didn't want to get any degrees. I did not. The whole time through my master's program, which I'm in a lot of debt for getting, I mostly just railed at it the ways that I was like, how is this teaching me to actually be present with people? I don't see it. I was really frustrated with the system that required me to get that. I now understand it more as a way to help me show that I'm committed enough and show that I can be vetted enough to be one who walks into these places where people are super vulnerable and I could really use my power in a wrong way. But I feel like there are those of us who I agree with you humbly that I do have a gift for this work, and there are those that actually do learn it intellectually. And I think that some of my colleagues that don't have the natural spiritual presence easily it's a little harder for them to do the job sometimes because their brain will take over, but they've read, like I didn't understand why we'd have these lists of things you could say. I was like, why? And then someone told me like, well, it's because some people don't have the intuition the same way. So some people have really just memorized that list, right? They've just really worked really hard to be able to serve in this capacity, even if they aren't gifted in that way.
I want to hop in and speak to the Chaplaincy Institute and the more feet in the sand education that we do here. And I will tell you, as the person who often gives a reference or whatever, our people walk into their clinical pastoral education units, and the educator, the person in charge of helping to learn them, will say, "What are you? Like, how did you get like this? How did you get so ready to be here?" And it is the internal gift, but it's also the way that we prepare them. And then our people get jobs that they aren't really qualified for. They'll be hired over a board certified professional as they're beginning their career. So just to say, yeah, we do a good job.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Carrie, though, because in the beginning, what I said, it lends true. I would not be here today without the Chaplaincy Institute, because I was considering dropping out of the master's program at Stark King because I was like, this is not doing anything for me. And because of beloved Ibrahim Baba, my beloved teacher who passed away the year I was graduating, because of him and others who saw this vision of bringing Chaplaincy Institute and making it accessible to us at that time. And now there's a different program set up, but I was able to stay in my program because I went to Chaplaincy Institute, and the way that we were taught, the presence of the teachers, the focus on what was really needed in the room, and the creative ritual that was brought in is how I am here today. So it felt a lot less intellectual in that way. It felt like it was more experiential learning. So I'm glad you said that, Carrie, because that was my saving grace.
You can still have 17 credits of chi work that goes into Stark. There are two questions. I know, right? There are two questions in the chat. Jessica says, "What do you?" And I see you, Celia. So let's try to get everybody in. What do you do for support, reflection, healing, supervision for yourself in this work? Well, we're going to have to stay on for 2 more hours, but
totally. Yeah. Well, where do we start? I have personal rituals that I do when I get off of work. When I first started, I did them every day or every end of every week. I have a tree in the park across the street that I go sit with, and I ask for it to take the dead from me, and I will just imagine that it's rooting and pulling any dead out of me and just lifting them up. I have spiritual direction whenever I need it. I have a 12-step program that I'm part of that focuses on codependency and people pleasing and all those kind of like ways that we might lose ourselves in our work. And I have good friends. And honestly, the redwoods don't live near me. I have to drive 5 hours, but once a year I go and do a pilgrimage. Once every year and a half, do a pilgrimage and just go sit quietly with the trees for 2 or 3 days. Those are some of the things. There are more. I have a big cat. That's one of them. Okay.
How is thank you, Jessica, for the question. How is the hospice chaplain different from a death doula?
That's awesome. That's a good question. It's really interesting because I live so much in the blur between the two that it's hard for me it was hard for me the first few years to understand how they're different. But what I've seen is that people who are completely in the hospice chaplain camp, there seems to be a little bit, not all the time, but a little bit more focus on the more thinking mind. They might not know about lowering the lights in a room or sense that there's something going on. It seems like it's a little bit different, but it's really personality oriented because there are a lot of us that have that kind of mystical death doula piece to us. So, but I know really great chaplains who aren't very wooey like I am, like mystical oriented. And they just kind of come from a different standpoint. They're more religious than I am. They don't do that with their patients, but their approach is different. Mm-hmm.
And then Sophia, let's hear what you have to say. Thank you. Great question, David. Thank you.
Hello, Reverend Riley. My name is Sophia. I'm also a graduate from Chi, so you're speaking our language here. I I appreciate what you said about sometimes we feel inadequate, I guess, because it takes a whole life to have lived experience, since every death is different. And I've been through chaplains for a unit of chaplaincy now, and I could see certain chaplain go in full of script.
Yes.
They know exactly what to say, but they're not there. And this is the problem. You're not there. You're not working on this, right? This groundedness is not there. So then there's nothing you could pull out, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
most of the time, it's not a tool chest that I'm bringing in. It's about myself. So when I'm in front of sitting next to the bed, whatever comes out of me is matching what's going on in the room. Not
Yeah.
always right, but this is
Mm-hmm.
who I am. I got to use this, right? And then plus life's experience, that's what shows up. And so there's a whole lot of work that I have to do, so, and then continue to do, I mean, Buddhists did say we take a whole lifetime to birth ourselves. So the day we die is the day we actually are birthed. That's
Mhm.
the difference. But
Mhm.
thank you so much for all your wisdom. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, Celia, and for naming that you've had that experience too. And I think for me, the difference once again was coming to the Chaplaincy Institute and being cultivated in that presence. And in my classes that I teach in July during the Dying and Death weekend, that is a place that I really focus. We start with the presence work, and then we go from there. We don't start from the intellectual. We start from the heart. All right. I think that we've almost run out of time here. So,
Riley,
yeah.
I'd love to invite you to do a closing,
Yeah,
and then
okay.
I will stay on afterwards if anyone has any other questions, and watch for that email. I'll send the video and all the resources that we've shared today. Thank you.
Wonderful. So, how I would like to close today is just once again inviting us into a place of being present with ourselves where we're at. Just noticing what has come up for you, curiosity or questions. Maybe you have stories that you have remembered from our talking. Maybe there are fears, or maybe there are joys that have come up from hearing what I've had to say. Just honoring and acknowledging that no matter what is coming up, there is a place for it at the table. And as you tend to your own self, it's gonna help. In my experience, it helps with how you're gonna be able to tend to others in your families, your friendships, and if you're doing this work. And so just a reminder to listen to your own wise hearts and let that be part of what helps you as you go through this life. That our minds are important, but our hearts have wise things to say. Thank you all for being here today. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Riley. I'm going to invite everybody to unmute and offer our thanks to Riley for this beautiful time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Riley. Look forward to
Thank
seeing
you,
you
Riley.
again.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks, Riley.
Thank you.
And thank